Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our feature shir for tonight. This year on Chaf Av, which is taking place this Shabbos, we are going to be marking the 80th Yartzheit of the Rebbe's father, Hagoin Harav HaChasid HaMakubal, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Schneerson. The Rebbe's father, aside from being a community figure, being the chief rabbi of Yekaterinoslav, who dedicated his life to spreading and teaching Torah and Yiddishkeit in the former Soviet Union and was sent into exile for his efforts. He was also a tremendous scholar, not just in the revealed parts of Torah, but particularly in the hidden dimension of Torah, the teachings of Kabbalah. We are very fortunate that we have some of Reb Leivik's writings, even though he was sent into exile and much of his works were lost. But we know that his wife, Rebbe Tzimchana, went to join him in his exile in Kazakhstan, where she procured ink for him to be able to write in the margins of the few Sfarim, the few books that he had with him. And eventually they were smuggled out and brought to New York and published in the format of Likutei Levi Yitzchok, which are the collected writings of the Rebbe's father on the teachings of Kabbalah. One of the Sfarim that the Rebbe's father had with him is the Sefer of the Zohar. And therefore, many of the writings that we have from Reb Leivik are on the Zohar. And what we're going to be looking at tonight is a section of the Zohar from Parshas Ve'eschanan based on the explanations of Reb Leivik. Reb Leivik had a very interesting style in the study of Kabbalah, in the study of the Zohar, in that every word of the Zohar was seen as being nuanced. And therefore, Reb Leivik would analyze and be medayek in the words, in the structure of the Zohar's text, and connect this obviously to teachings of Hasidus as well. So one of the things that Rebbe asked is that in connection to the Yartzheit of his father, we should learn his teachings. And that is true every year on the Yartzheit, but how much more so this year, being 80 years. In Bigvurei Shmainim Shana, that 80 is a certain level of strength. So I thought it would be appropriate for us to study some of his teachings. And in that schus yagan aleinu, his merit should be a blessing for all of us and bring us all blessings in our own personal lives as well. So the mitzvah of Mezuzah is found in two parashas in the Torah. One is in the parsha of Shema Yisrael, which we read last week in Parshas Ve'eschanan. The second place where the parsha of the Shema is found is in the parsha of V'haya im Shamaya, the second parsha of the Shema. And indeed, these are the two parashas which are written in the Mezuzah. The Mezuzah has the parsha of Shema and the parsha of V'haya im Shamaya. And whilst the section that we're going to be looking at is based on Shema Yisrael in Va'eschanan, we are also going to learn it this week because it is connected to the mitzvah of Mezuzah, which is found in this week's parsha. Now, unfortunately, time does not allow us to learn the text inside, but what we are going to do is through the aid of visual slides, which I'll bring up on the screen for everyone to follow along, I'm going to guide us through the study of the Rebbe's father and the Rebbe's father's analysis. And one of the things that his analysis is based on the Kabbalistic concept of the spheros. In general, when we talk about the spheros, we have the intellectual spheros, Chachma, Bina, and Das, which are the different intellectual processes. Primarily, they are Chachma and Bina. Chachma is referred to as the father, the Abba, and Bina is referred to as the mother. And then we have the Midos. And the Midos, there are 7 of them. And they can be further broken up into the following groupings. The first 5 of the Midos, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod, those are the primary spheres themselves. And therefore, they are considered the godly energies within the world of Atzilus. Whereas Yesod and Malchus is very much about taking that energy and conveying it outwards. Malchus, of course, is the receiver of those energies, of those godly lights. And Malchus takes those lights and brings them down into the lower worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Yesod, the sphere of Yesod, is the joining point between the upper 5 sephiros and the sphere of Malchus. And that's really a hakdama, an introduction to be able to understand the concepts that we are going to be discussing in our shir tonight. So I'm going to bring up on the screen the slides. Please follow along. We're going to be starting off with the actual text of the Zohar itself. So here we have a text of the Zohar from Parshas Ve'eschanan on the mitzvah of Mezuzah. And the Zohar says as follows: Zakah chulkein di Yisrael. The portion of the Jewish people is fortunate Kedain ishtamoidan Yisrael, in order that the Jewish people should know, the inun bnei Malka Kadisha, that they are the children of the Holy King. Da'akula is reshimu minei, and they are all marked with the mark of the Holy King. And then the Zohar lists the various marks with which Hashem marks the Jewish people. It's Reshima Bukufayu, we are marked, we are branded in our bodies, in our flesh, Bereshima Kadisha, with the holy sign. And that refers to the bris milah, the mitzvah of the bris, which is a sign which is sealed into our flesh. It's Reshimu Bilbushayu, we are marked with our garments, with our clothing, Bitufayu the mitzvah, with the wrapping of the mitzvah, which refers to the mitzvah of tzitzit. It's the mitzvah that we envelop our bodies with. It's Reshimu Bereishayu, we are marked on our heads, in the heads of the Jewish people, but Bate de Tefillin, with the boxes of the tefillin. The tefillin that we are on our head is the mark of Hashem that sits upon our head. Bishma de Mareon, and these have on them the name of their master, the name of Hashem. And that refers to the shin on the boxes of the tefillin. Isrishimu biyadayu, we are marked by Hashem with our arms. Berutzui diktush, and that refers to the tefillin shal yad, the arm tefillin, the rutzua, the strap with which we bind ourselves. Isrishimu mesanayu, we are marked with our shoes. And Rabbi Levi explains that what is the mitzvah associated with shoes? There are two possibilities. One of the possibilities is that Chazal were very emphatic that it's highly important to have a pair of shoes to protect our feet, and a person, if necessary, should sell all of their possessions to procure a pair of shoes. Alternatively, the Gemara tells us that the Jewish people had a unique way, a unique type of shoelaces, a color that they would wear, and we are prohibited from emulating the non-Jews and even have to have self-sacrifice for protecting our way of dress, even for something as insignificant as our shoelaces. And that is the mitzvah, the shoes of a mitzvah. Isreshimu levar. So those first 5 mitzvahs are all mitzvahs that are associated with our body. And now we are marked, we are distinguished outside in the field. Bizriya b'chatzta, with our planting and with our harvesting. That refers to the agricultural mitzvahs where we serve Hashem through our efforts, our work in the field. Isreshimu b'bateyon, and we are marked, we are distinguished in our houses. The Mezuzah de Pischa, with the Mezuzah that sits on the door of the house. With all of these, we are marked because we are the children of the supernal king. Fortunate is our lot. So that's the passage of the Zohar. And Rabbi Levi begins with a couple of observations. Number one, the first line and the last line of the Zohar seem to be repetitive. So if you have a look in the slide over here, you'll see that the first line of the Zohar says, Zakah chukeon di Yisrael, the fortunate is the lot of the Jewish people. Kedain ishmoid in Yisrael, in order to inform the Jewish people, di inu bnei Malka Kadisha, that they are the sons of the Holy King. And kulu is reshimu minei, we are all marked with the marks of the Holy King. And in the final line, the Zohar repeats, but in reverse order, but koilo reshimin, we are marked with all of these mitzvahs. Di inu bnei Malka ilah, because they, the Jewish people, are the children of the supernal king. And zakah chukeon, and finally, fortunate is their lot, just like the passage of the Zohar began. So the question we're going to analyze is, why do we have this repetition at the beginning and at the end? And why is the order of the points in the beginning and end reversed? The next question Rabbi Levi asks is that this passage of the Zohar is very much focused, it's supposed to be discussing the mitzvah of Mezuzah. So why is it that the passage includes here 7 different types of mitzvahs? There's the mitzvah of the bris milah, the mitzvah of the talis, the mitzvah of the tefillin shel yad, the tefillin shel rosh, the mitzvah of shoes, the mitzvah in the field. What is their relevance over here? We have to say that the fact that these mitzvahs are included in the passage of the Zohar discussing the mezuzah is because the mitzvah mezuzah somehow incorporates or unifies all of these mitzvahs together. So how are we going to explore this? We're going to explore based on an idea which is found in the writings of Chassidus, that the word mezuzah itself, and therefore the mitzvah mezuzah, represents the union of masculine and feminine. How do we see that in the word mezuzah? So the word mezuzah is made up of mem, the letter mem, zu, and zeh. The two words zu and zeh, or zoi and zeh, both mean this. But one is in feminine terms, when you're referring to a female person or object, and zeh is in masculine form when you're referring to a male or a masculine object. So the word mezuzah incorporates both the zu, which is the feminine, and the zeh, which is the masculine, in the one word, representing the zivuk, the union, the marriage between masculine and feminine together. What is the mem? So the mem here, Reb Leivik says, is based on two ideas. Number one, the paradigm of marriage in the Torah, the ultimate union of male and female, is the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, the first Jewish couple born Jewish to get married in the Torah. The mem represents the fact that Yitzchak was 40 years old when he got married. So the mem zu zeh, represents the union of male and female being connected to the 40 years. Furthermore, the Gemara tells us that 40 days before a vlad, before a fetus is formed, a bas kol, a heavenly voice, goes out and announces bas ploini leploini, that so and so will marry the daughter of so and so. So again, the marriage represents the idea of zu and zeh, the union of male and female. And 40 days beforehand, the mem, it's already announced who this union will be with. So taking this premise that the mezuzah represents the union of masculine and feminine, we're going to explore this now in terms of the parshas in the tefillin itself, in the mezuzah. The parshas in the mezuzah are two parshas. The first, the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and the second is V'haya im Shamayim. The first parsha represents the attribute of chesed, the attribute of kindness, which in general is considered a masculine sphira. As the pasuk says, Zachar chastoi, remember his kindness, but the word Zachar can also mean male. So Zachar chastoi, the sphere of chesed, is a male sphira, and it's about giving. And that is alluded to in the first parsha of the Shema, where we have the mitzvah of V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, the mitzvah of love of Hashem, because love is an expression of the attribute of chesed. In contrast, the second parsha of the Shema is about yira, is about the attribute of fear, which is associated with kuvura, which is a feminine energy. And we see this in the second parsha of the Shema, where we have a stern warning. Hishamru lachem, be very, very warned. Pen yifta levavchem, lest your heart be led astray, be seduced and led astray to serve other gods. So in the mezuzah itself, we have the combination of two parshas, a masculine parsha, which is Shema Yisrael, which is chesed, and the feminine parsha, which is the gevura, and that is V'haya im Shamayim. And they come together in the one scroll of the mezuzah, because the mezuzah, zu and zeh, is the union of masculine and feminine together. When we take this idea a little bit further, we're now going to explore this in context of the various mitzvahs which are mentioned in the passage of the Zohar. That these are the different reshimos, the different signs with which Hashem marks or brands and distinguishes the Jewish people. So if we have a look at these mitzvahs, the first 5 mitzvahs are all mitzvahs that are performed within the house or on the body of the person. The first one being the Reshima Kadisha, the Bris Milah, which of course is a mitzvah that takes place indoors and it's on the body of the person. Itufayu the mitzvah, the wrapping of the talis, which is done at home or in shul, again on the body of the person. The box of the tefillin shel rosh, the ritzua of the tefillin shel yad, the shoes that we put on, all of those mitzvahs are connected to the person and generally performed within the house. In contrast, the next mitzvah listed in the Zohar is about the field. It's about outdoors, outside of the house, and that is the agricultural mitzvahs of plowing and harvesting. The mitzvahs are connected to the ground. So the first 5 mitzvahs are very much connected to the house or the person. The last mitzvah which is mentioned is connected to the field. And then we have the mitzvah of mezuzah. The mitzvah of mezuzah is what we call a memutza. A memutza means an intermediary, a connector between two opposites. So we have the mitzvahs that are in the house, and then we have the mitzvah in the field. The connection point is the doorway of the home that leads out from the home to the field and from the field into the house. So the mitzvah of mezuzah, which is placed on the doorway, is the bridge between the first 5 mitzvahs listed here that are on the person and in the house, and the final mitzvah being the mitzvahs that are performed in the field. When we look a little bit further, we're going to analyze these mitzvahs, but before we do so, the Rebbe's father says that this too is connected to an aspect of the way that the mezuzah is written. On the inside of the mezuzah, we saw before, we have the 2 passages, Shema and V'haya. It is a minhag, and that's brought in Shulchan Aruch, that on the reverse side of the mezuzah, which when we roll it up, that is on the outside of the mezuzah, we write the name of Hashem, Shin Dalad Yud, the name Shakai. And the place that is written, it's written on the back of the mezuzah, but it's written corresponding to the place where the word Vahaya of the beginning of the second paragraph is written. So the inside of the mezuzah has the Vahaya, and the outside has the name Shin Dalad Yud, the name Shaka. The name Shin Dalad Yud Shaka is also connected to the word Sadeh, which means a field. And therefore the name Shakai, which is connected to a field, is on the outside of the mezuzah scroll, just like the house, just like the field is on the outside of the outside of the house. Whereas the Vahaya, which the word Vahaya, Vav, Hey, Yud, and Hey, has the same letters as the name of Yud K Vav K. And the name Yud K Vav K represents the spheroids of what we call Zer Anpin. It represents the masculine energies, the masculine spheroids of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hoid, and Yesod. And that is on the inside because the mitzvahs that are on the inside, whereas the mitzvah on the outside in the field is connected to the name Shakai, Shin Dalad Yud, which is connected to field. The mitzvahs on the inside are connected to the name Yud K Vav K, and those are the mitzvahs that are performed inside of the house, and therefore that name is on the inside of the scroll. So when we look at these mitzvahs more specifically, we're going to see how the 7 mitzvahs which are listed correspond to the 7 spheres. So if we have a look over here, we have the listing of the mitzvahs the way they are found in the Zohar. The first one is Rishimu Bugufayu Bereshima Kadisha. That we will see in a moment corresponds to the sphere of Chesed. Isrishimu Bubushayu, they are marked with the garment of the mitzvah, that is the tzitzis, that is connected to the sphere of Gevura. They are marked with the box of the tefillin, that is connected to the sphere of Tiferes. They are marked with the ritzua of the tefillin, that is connected to Netzach, or as we'll see, perhaps a subset of Tiferes. And the shoes represent the spheres of Netzach and Hoid, respectively. And therefore, those 5 mitzvahs, since they are on the person, and since they are the 5 primary spheres, therefore they are within the house. Therefore, they are on the inside of the mezuzah scroll, and they're connected to the higher name of Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke, which are the letters of the word Vahaya, which is on the inside of the scroll. Whereas the last mitzvah, the mitzvah of the field, corresponds to the sphere of Malchus. As we know, the sphere of Malchus goes out from the world of Atzilus into the lower worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. And therefore, Malchus is like the field. And Malchus, in fact, is referred to as the Chakal Tapuch in Kadishin, the apple orchard, the holy apple orchard, because it is on the outside. It is the field. So the first 5 of these mitzvahs correspond to the 5 primary spheres, which are therefore inside the realm of holiness. And that's connected to the masculine. Whereas Malchus, which is on the outside in the field, being a feminine sphere, that is connected to the name Shin, Dalad, and Yud. So how does this play out? Why do we say that the mitzvah of Bris Milah is connected to Chesed, the mitzvah of Tzitzis is connected to Gevura? So we have a fascinating explanation that the Rebbe's father brings. The mitzvah of Bris Milah was commanded to Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, these 6 mitzvahs are all listed in, the question just came through, they're all listed in the Zohar in Va'eschanan, in a passage of the Zohar discussing the Mezuzah. So what we are doing is we're exploring how all of these mitzvahs correspond or are connected to the mitzvah of Mezuzah specifically. So the first person to be commanded with the Bris Milah was Avraham Avinu. And we know that Kabbalistically, Avraham Avinu is the embodiment of the attribute of Chesed. That's why his service of Hashem was one of Chesed and one of Ahava. That's the way he engaged with other people in Gemilus Chasadim. And his service of Hashem was one of love. So therefore, the Bris Milah corresponds to the sphere of Chesed. Furthermore, says the Rebbe's father, actually before we come back to that, he says that the 5 mitzvahs which are connected to the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, being the mitzvah of the Bris Milah, the tzitzis, tefillin shel rosh, tefillin shel yad, and the shoes of the mitzvah, correspond to the 5 psukim after Shema in the passage of Shema and V'ahavta. Each of those 5 psukim, as you can see over here, begins with a Vav and ends with a Chav. V'ahavta b'chol moedecha, v'hayu al levavecha, v'shinantam v'kumecha, etc. Vav and Chav, of course, come to the gematria of 26, which is the gematria of the name Yud Ke Vav Ke. alluding to how each of these 5 mitzvahs are connected to the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the inside of the mitzvah scroll, which is the same letters as the word Vahaya. In contrast to the mitzvah, the field, which is connected to the name Shakai Shin Dalad Yud. So Avraham Avinu was given the bris milah. Bris milah is connected to chesed. As we see, first of all, I quoted the pasuk before, Zachar Chastoi, remember his kindness. And Zachar is also a male. And bris milah is a mitzvah which is performed for the male. It's performed on the body of the male, and therefore connected to chesed. Of course, it was commanded to Abraham, who embodies chesed. And furthermore, there are 5 aspects of chesed. Just we know chesed is the right hand, gevura being the left hand. Just as the right hand has 5 fingers, there are 5 aspects of chesed, and the left hand has 5 fingers. There are 5 aspects of gevura. Chesed is synonymous with toiv, goodness. That's why on the first day of creation it says Vayar Elokim es ha'or ki toiv. Light is chesed, and chesed is goodness. We have the word toiv, which is a gematria of 17, times 5 for the 5 chasadim, comes to the same gematria as the word milah, which is 85. So all of these show to us that the mitzvah of bris milah is connected to the sphira of chesed. The next mitzvah is the mitzvah of tzitzis, and that is connected to the sphira of gevura. How so? So the Rebbe Levi explains in a number of ways. First of all, the tzitzis, when it was performed in its ideal form, we had the psil techeles, the string of techeles. In Kabbalah, the color techeles, or the string of techeles, is connected with the sphira of gevura. Indeed, the color of the techeles is supposed to remind us of the ocean, which reminds us of the heaven, which reminds us the kisei hakavod. And the kisei hakavod is referred to as the kisei hadin, the throne of Hashem's judgment, din being an attribute of gevura. Furthermore, the tzitzis have on them 5 knots and 8 strings. Each of the corners, 5 knots and 8 strings. The 5 knots correspond to the 5 letters of the name Elokim. We know that the name Elokim is the name associated with the attribute of judgment, and therefore midas hagavura. So we have the 5 letters of Elokim corresponding to the 5 knots of the tzitzis. And when we spell each letter out in full, what we call the milui, Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pei, Lamed Lamed Mem Daled, Hey is Hey Hey, Yud Yud Vav Daled, and Mem is Mem Mem. If we count just the letters of the milui, there are 8 letters that make up the milui of the name Elokim. So the first 5 letters correspond to the 5 knots, and the 8 letters of the milui, when we spell the name Elokim, the letters in full, correspond to the 8 strings of the tzitzis. So the second mitzvah corresponds to gevura. Taking this a little bit further, the word tzitzis has the gematria of 600. What's the significance of 600? How does it relate to gevura? So the Rebbe's father explains as follows. When we talk about gevura, gevura is associated with a number of different numbers. One of them is shin chaf, or shach, 320. And why is that? As I mentioned earlier, like the hand has 5 fingers, there are 5 aspects of gevura. Gevura is synonymous with din, dalad yud nun. When we take 5 times the word din, it comes to the gematria of shin chaf, giving us the 320 gevuras. Similarly, the word par is made up of the combined gematria of the 5 letters which have a double form. There's a mem and a final mem, a nun and a final nun, tzaddik and a final tzaddik, pei and a final pei, and a chaf and a final chaf. These being doubled represent the attribute of gevura, and the combined gematria of these 5 letters comes to pei reish, 280. So if we take the 320, the shin chaf, the 5 times din, plus the 280, which is the combined gematria of the double letters of the aleph base, it comes to 600. Furthermore, 600 is also related to gevura because it corresponds to the 120 unique permutations of the name Elokim. If you have a look on the chart that I bring up over here, the name Elokim is made up of 5 letters. And when we rearrange these letters in their different possible combinations, it gives rise to a total of 120 unique combinations. And these are known as the permutations of Shem Elokim. And 5 times 120, because there are 5 gevuros, also comes to gematria 600, which is the gematria of tzitzis. So through all of these ideas, Rebbe Levi illustrates that the mitzvah of tzitzis is connected to the attribute of gevura. The third mitzvah, which is listed in the Zohar, is the tefillin shel rosh, is the tefillin that is worn on the head. And that corresponds to the third sphera, which is the sphera of Tiferes. Now, in a general sense, that is both the tefillin shel rosh and the tefillin shel yad as well. Why is tefillin connected to Tiferes? Tiferes means beauty. We're just coming from Tisha B'Av. We know on Tisha B'Av, we don't wear our tefillin in the morning, and instead we put them on the afternoon. Why don't we wear tefillin in the morning? And in the same way, a mourner, an avel, does not put on tefillin on the first day of his mourning, is because Yechezkel was told, you should wear your adornment, but the rest of the Jewish people must take off their adornment. And that adornment refers to the tefillin. So a person who is in mourning, as we are on the day of Tisha B'Av, we don't wear our tefillin because tefillin is an adornment, something which brings us joy. And the word pe'er, adornment, comes from the word tiferes. Furthermore, we know, based on Kabbalah, that Yaakov Avinu, when he was by Lavan and he carved the various sticks in order that the sheep could give birth to spotted, speckled, and banded animals, that Kabbalistically had the same kavanas as the mitzvah of tefillin. And Yaakov Avinu is the embodiment of the midah of Tiferes. So far we have the bris milah is chesed, that's Abraham Avinu. We have the gevura, which is the tzitzis, the techelas, etc. And then we have the tefillin, which corresponds to the midah of Tiferes. The next one is quite straightforward, and that is the mitzvah of shoes. Shoes are worn on the two legs, and the two legs are the netzach and hoid. Chesed is the right hand, gevura the left hand, Tiferes is the torso. Netzach and hoid are the two legs where the shoes are worn. So therefore we see that the 5 primary mitzvahs in the Zohar that are listed over here correspond to the 5 primary spheres. And of course, the mitzvah of the field corresponds to the sphera of Malchus. When we look further, when the Zohar discusses the mitzvah of tefillin, it talks about the batei tefillin. When it talks about the tefillin shel rosh, it talks about the boxes of tefillin, which have Shema Marehoin, which has the name of their master, the name of Hashem upon them. And when it talks about the tefillin shel yad, it emphasizes the ritzue. It emphasizes the straps of the tefillin. Why is that? So the tefillin shel rosh, as we see over here, the pasuk tells us that v'rou kol amei haaretz ki shem Hashem nikra lecha v'yaru mimeka. This was one of the big psukim which the Rebbe quoted in Mivtza Tefillin in connection to 1967 war and subsequent wars in Eretz Yisrael. The pasuk says that the nations of the world will see that the name of Hashem is called upon you, and they will be afraid of you. And the Gemara explains, what does this mean? What does it mean, the name of Hashem called upon you? The Tanya was taught in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol Omer Elu Tefillin Shebarosh. This refers to the tefillin of the head, because the tefillin of the head on both sides of the bayis have the shin of the name of Hashem, shin dalad yud. And so therefore the name of Hashem upon us refers to the tefillin shel rosh. And Rabbi Levi points out that the words of the pasuk, Shem, Hashem, Nikra, is the Rashi Tevas of the word Shin. When we spell Shin in full, Shin, Yud, Nun, that is Shem, Hashem, Nikra. So the name of Hashem upon our heads, that refers to the Tefillin Shel Rosh. And therefore, the Tefillin Shel Rosh, we emphasize the box of the Tefillin. In contrast, when it comes to the Tefillin Shel Yad, we emphasize the Ritzua, we emphasize the strap, because, number one, the name of Hashem on the Tefillin Shel Yad is the knot on the Tefillin Shel Yad, which is in the shape of the Yud of the name Shakai Shin Dalad Yud. And the mitzvah of Tefillin Shel Yad is ukshartem, to tie, and therefore is connected to the Ritzua. So, to summarize where we're up to now, we have the first 5 of these mitzvahs are all connected to the first 5 spheres, being Chesed, the bris milah, Gevura, the tzitzis, Tiferes is the tefillin, Netzach and Hoid are the shoes. More specifically, Rabbi Levi now explains that we can connect all of these mitzvahs to the 3 avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. How so? So as we already discussed, the bris milah is connected to Abraham Avinu. He was the first person to be commanded on the bris milah. Similarly, the tzitzis, as well as the shoes, are also connected to Abraham Avinu. How so? When Abraham Avinu rescued Lot and he brought back all of the rechush, all of the wealth of Sodom, so the king of Sodom said to Abraham Avinu, you can keep all of the wealth, give me back the people. And Abraham Avinu declined, he refused that offer, And he says, "Imichut v'adzreich nahal." I will not take even a thread and even the strap of a shoe, lest people say that you made me wealthy. So as a reward for that action of Avraham Avinu, michut, we were meritorious to have the chut of the mitzvah, which refers to the threads of the tzitzis, and the streich now we were zoicha to have the mitzvah which is connected to the shoes. So therefore, the mitzvah of bris milah, the mitzvah of tzitzis, and the mitzvah of the shoe straps corresponds to Avraham Avinu. As we mentioned earlier, Yaakov Avinu is connected to the mitzvah of tefillin, when Yaakov carved the sticks, and therefore the two mitzvahs of tefillin, the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh, correspond to Yaakov. Avram is the sphere of chesed, and Yaakov is the sphere of tiferes. Both chesed and tiferes have an inclination of kindness. Whilst tiferes, we say, is a balance or a mix of chesed and gvura together, but it's predominantly leaning towards chesed. So these first 5 mitzvahs, which are connected to Avram and Yaakov, are mitzvahs which are connected to chesed, which is the masculine sphere. In contrast, the mitzvah of the field, which is malchus, is connected to Yitzchak. We know Yitzchak worked in the field. That when Yitzchak planted, he planted and reaped mea sha'arim, 100-fold through his work in the field. And we know that Yitzchak, being the midah of Gevura is connected with the sphere of Malchus. Both of them are considered to be feminine spheres, and Malchus receives its nourishment through the contracted light of the sphere of Gevura. Again, alluding to the grouping that the first 5 mitzvahs, which are the mitzvahs performed in the house, are connected to the masculine, whereas the last mitzvah of the field is connected to the feminine. Now, tying it back to Mezuzah, we explained that the Mezuzah is the mamutza between these mitzvahs. You have the mitzvahs inside the house, you have the mitzvahs in the field, and then you have the doorway in between. The Mezuzah is placed in between because it connects, like the sphere of Yesod, as we'll see in a moment, connects the mitzvahs of the first 5 spheres to the sphere of Malchus. So here we have a diagram of the spheres, and one can see is that the sphere of Yesod is the channel which brings the energy from the upper spheres and conveys them to the sphere of Malchus. Yesod, therefore, is the connection of the masculine spheres with Malchus, which is the feminine sphere. And therefore, the mitzvah Mezuzah incorporates within it the yichud, the union of masculine and feminine, having the word zu, which is feminine, zoi, and zeh, which is masculine, because Yesod is about the connection between the two. And we see this in the pasuk where the 7 spheres are alluded to in the Tanakh. As a pasuk which we say when we take out the Sefer Torah, we say, L'cha Hashem ha'gdula v'ha'gvura v'ha'tiferes v'ha'netzach v'ha'hoid, ki kol b'shamayim v'aretz, L'cha Hashem ha'mamlacha. To you Hashem is greatness and strength and beauty and eternity, etc. The Gedula refers to the sphere of Chesed, Gevura is Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hoid. And then we have Kikol Bashamayim Va'aretz, for everything in heaven and earth. And to you, Hashem, is Mamlacha, kingship, which is the sphere of Malchus. These words, Kikol Bashamayim Uva'aretz, alludes to the sphere of Yesod. And the Zohar explains the Achid Shemaya Va'ara, that the sphere of Yesod unites heaven and earth. Shamayim, heaven, represents the loftiest spheres, the 5 masculine energies, and Aretz is Malchus. One of the terms that Malchus is described as is the Aretz is the land, just like the earth is the bedrock, it's the lowest point in our world. So too, Malchus is the lowest of the spheres. And the sphere of Yesod unites the two. Kikol Bashamayim Uva Aretz, the Achid B'Shmaya Va'aret, it unites together the heaven and the earth together. So therefore, when we look at these mitzvahs in the Torah, we now understand why they are all connected to the mitzvah of Mezuzah. Because the Mezuzah is what connects them all. The Mezuzah is the yichud of the masculine and the feminine. The first 5 mitzvahs which are performed in the house are connected to the masculine. And the last mitzvah which is performed in the field is connected to Malchus, which is connected to the feminine. And since Yesod unites them together, therefore, it is, these are all found in this place. Okay, great question. Why is the house masculine and the field feminine? Isn't that so different from the avodah of masculine and feminine as we know it? That is a great question to ask. Here we are talking in terms of the spheres. Yes, it's true. Man's work is out in the field and the feminine work is inside of the house. Here we're using the house as representing the domain of Kedusha and the field representing the outside. And therefore, in terms of spheres, the sphere of Malchus is what journeys outside into the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, whereas the concentration of the godly light is within the walls, so to speak, of the house of the world of Atzilus. But you're correct in that the terms of the Avodah, it is reversed. Okay, so now we've now discussed, if we go back to the beginning, we've discussed the mitzvahs that are in between. But as we saw before, they are sandwiched in between the introduction of the Zohar and the conclusion of the Zohar, which seem to be repetitive. The midos, the 7 emotions, are referred to as tuldos. They're called the offspring. They're called the children. Chachma and Bina, the intellectual spheres, are the mother and the father that give birth to the emotions. Just as we know that our intellectual processes and our meditations gives birth to our emotional response. So when we talk about the spheres of Chachma and Bina, Chachma being the perception of an idea, that is a masculine, therefore it's called the father. Bina is called the mother. So when the Zohar says at the beginning, De'inun b'nei Malka Kadisha, that they, the Jewish people, are the children of the Malka Kadisha, that refers to the sphere of Chachma, which is called Kodesh or Kodesh. Whereas when it says b'nei Malka Elah, that they are the children of the supernal king, that is a representation of the sphere of Bina, which is called Elyon. And how is that? So this is a very complex idea. I'll just run through it very quickly. We're not going to labor too long on it. But here we have as follows. When we take the name Yud-K, Vav-K, and we spell those letters out in full, you can spell those letters in a number of different ways. So for example, the letter Hey could be spelled Hey Yud, or Hey Aleph, or Hey Hey. And depending how we spell the letters in full, it gives rise to different gematrias. There are 4 possible gematrias. They are Ayin Beis, 72, Samach Gimel, 63, Mem Hey is 45, and Ban Beis Nun is 52. We're going to be focusing on Sag, 63. Ab is connected to the sphere of Chachma. That's the most sublime of the names. Sag is connected to Bina. And when we look at this, if we spell out the letters in full, so we come to a total of 166. When we spell it out in accordance with Sag, which is the reflection of Bina, we come to a total gematria of 166, which has the same gematria as the word Elyon. So going back, when we say De'inu b'nei Malka Ilah, that is referring to Bina, as opposed to Malka Kadisha refers to Chachma. So therefore, what happens is as follows. The introduction of the Zohar, which talks about B'nai Malka Kadisha, is the father, that is Chachma. The conclusion, which says we are B'nai Malka Ilah, is Bina. They are the mother and father who are the partners. And in between, we have the offspring, which are the mitzvahs, which correspond to the 7 midas. So based on that, this is just a depiction of what I just mentioned. The introduction, Zakah Chuken, the Yisrael fortunate is the lot of the Jewish people, that in order to let them know that they are the children of the Malka Kadisha, the holy king, which is Chachma, they are therefore marked with all of the markings of Chachma. We then list the 7 mitzvahs, which correspond to the 7 spheres, our focus being on the Mezuzah, which is Yasoid, which unites the internal mitzvahs, the first 5 spheres, and Malchus, which is the external mitzvah of the field. And then finally, we conclude, we are marked Ilah, we are marked with all of these mitzvahs, because we are the children of the Malka Ilah, which is Bina, and Zakah Chukeo, unfortunate, is their lot. So when we analyze now these, the introduction and the conclusion, the introduction corresponding to Chachma and the conclusion coming to Bina, we're now going to understand why they're in reverse order. Because in the introduction, we begin saying Zakah Chukeo, fortunate is their lot. Then we say that they are all the children of the Holy King, and therefore they are marked with these markings. In the conclusion, we say, B'kula Rishimin, we are marked with all of these markings, because we are the children of the supernal king. Zakah Chukeo, unfortunate, is their portion. It's in reverse. So why is that? So to explain, we can explain in a number of possibilities. Chachma is mashpia and Malchus is makabel. One of the analogies brought from the flow from the mashpia to a makabel is when you take a signet ring and you make an impression into wax. And when you make an impression into wax, it becomes inverted, meaning whatever on the signet ring is a depression will become boiled, will become a protrusion in the wax. And whatever is a protrusion on the ring will become an impression in the wax. So it creates an inverse effect. That what exists in Chachma will come out in Bina in an inverse way. And therefore, the order is opposite. Furthermore, the Rebbe's father points out something fascinating. We know that in the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud corresponds to the sphere of Chachma, and the Hey corresponds to the sphere of Bina. The word Yud is spelled Yud Vav Daled. So the Yud Vav Daled represents Chachma. The Hey is Bina. But if we break down the spelling of the word Hey as Hey and Yud, the Hey is made up with a Daled and a small Vav in between. So we take the Daled and the Vav from the Hey, and then the Yud. So it is the same Yud, but spelled backwards. So in Chachma, it's Yud Vav Daled, and in Bina, it is the Hey, which is Daled Vav Yud. Again, showing the inverse relationship from Chachma and Bina. And that's why in the introduction, it is in one order, but in which, because that is talking about Malka Kadisha, that is talking about the sphere of Chachma. But then afterwards, it is in inverse because that is talking about the sphere of Bina, the mother and father that give rise to the offspring. Therefore, when we have a look at the mitzvah of Mezuzah, we have Zu and Zeh, masculine and feminine, coming together. Not only in terms of the offspring, that we have the masculine mitzvahs, which are the mitzvahs in the home, and then we have the Zeh, the field, which is Malchus, which is feminine, that is outside. But if we distill that down, we have the two Zions of Zu and Zeh, because there is the way the seven Midos receive from Chachma, and the way they receive from Bina. And therefore it has two Zions in them, representing these two flows. Moving on further, it says, B'chachma yasad eretz. There's a pasuk which says that Hashem founds the world with Chachma, Koinen shamayim b'tfuna, and he establishes the heavens with tevuna. Tevuna is bina, with understanding. In these psukim, with regards to Chachma, it begins with Chachma and then says what Chachma creates. B'chachma yasad eretz. But in the part of the pasuk discussing bina, tevuna, it begins with shamayim, what it creates, and then it says tevuna. Then it says bina. Coming back to these two sentences in the Zohar. So the first one says, the inun malka b'nei malka kadisha, which is Chachma. They are the children of the supernal king, which is Chachma, and therefore they are marked with the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs follow the malka kadisha, which is Chachma. Whereas in the conclusion, you have Bekula Rishimin, they are all marked with these mitzvahs. The inun b'nei malka ilah, because they are the children of Bina, the malka ilah. Just like in the pasuk, it first says Shamayim and then Tevuna. In a further distinction, when we draw Chachma, Bina, and Das on the three lines of the Spheros, Chachma is the beginning of the right-hand column, which is the line of Chesed, whereas Bina is on the line of Gevura. And therefore, Chachma is a Sphera which is connected to Chesed, and Gevura is a Sphera which is, Bina is a Sphera which is connected to Gevura. When Chesed looks at something, when a person is a kind person, they are one of Chesed, then they see everybody as deserving or fortunate, worthy of blessing, irrespective of their actions. And therefore, the line of the Zohar, which talks about Chachma, the Malka Kadisha, begins Zakah Chukei Di Yisrael. The Jewish people have a fortunate lot because Chesed sees good fortune in everybody. And only afterwards it says, Kulu Isrishimu Minei, they are also marked with the mitzvahs that they performed. But Gevura is about judgment. And when it comes to judgment, you are only worthy of blessing and reward if you are deserving of it. And therefore, the conclusion of the Zohar, which is the connected to Bina, begins Bekulu Rishimin, because they are all marked with these mitzvahs that they do. That makes them the children of the supernal king, and therefore, Zakah Chukei, they are fortunate in their lot. So we have a different perspective from Chachma. And Bina, Chachma being Chesed, sees good fortune irrespective of whether they have fulfilled the mitzvahs or not, whether they are deserving or not. Whereas Bina, which is Gevura, or is on the line of Gevura, looks at whether they are deserving and only then says, Zakah Chukei, fortunate are they in their portion. The two Zions, the Zion, says Rabbi Levi towards his conclusion, Zayin is the Rosh Tevis of the word zakah. If we go back to the Zohar, it begins zakah chukein di Yisrael, which is the fortunate of you, the Jewish people, mitzad chachma, and it concludes zakah chukein, fortune is their lot, mitzad bina. So the Zayin, zakah, in Mezuzah has two Zayins, and therefore there is the zakah, the two Zayins which are mentioned here in the Zohar, and they are both found in Mezuzah. And the word zakah, if we take the gematria of the word zakah twice, it comes to the gematria of 66, which is the same gematria of Mezuzah im hakoilo. One of the methodologies of calculating a gematria is that we add one for the totality of the word. So Mezuzah is 65, and when we add to that the one for the word, we come to the gematria of 60. We come to the gematria of 66. And with this, Rabbi Levi concludes that is the schus of the mitzvah of Mezuzah. So to really just summarize and bring it to a close, and I think, if anything, this just gives us a glimpse of kind of the way the Rebbe's father's mind looks at things, that every part of the Zohar is nuanced and everything is interrelated. So what we explored over here is that the mitzvah of Mezuzah incorporates within it all of the spheres, because the mitzvah of Mezuzah corresponding to the sphere of Yesod, it's on the doorway going from the house to the field to the house, and therefore it is the memutza that connects the first 5 mitzvahs, which are the mitzvah of bris chesed, the mitzvah of tzitzis gevura, the mitzvah of tefillin, which is tiferes, and the mitzvah of the shoes, which is netzach and hoy. Those are the 5 primary spheres, and connects it to malchus, which is the mitzvah in the field. The first 5 are therefore masculine, corresponding to the masculine spheres, and the mitzvah of the field is feminine. And the mezuzah, which is yesod, which unites the masculine and feminine together, it's the bridge between the two, therefore comprises masculine and feminine, mezuzah being mem, the 40 years of Yitzchok when he got married, with the zu and the zeh and zu being masculine and feminine as well. And they receive from chachma and bina, which are also the masculine and feminine, and those are the two zakahs, which are the two zayins in the word mezuzah. So it is quite a mind-blowing thing. And this, really for me, it takes hours of study to try and understand and get into the mind of Rebbe Levi. And of course, our Rebbe took the teaching of his father incredibly seriously and shared them at the Fabrengens. And a lot of the Rebbe's style, particularly in the later years of the Sichos, was very much shaped by the teachings of Rebbe Levi. Rebbe Levi was a Rav in a place where most of the people were very simple people. And they would come to him for Shalosh Shudas on Shabbos afternoon, and that was the time that he would be doirish. That was the time that he would expound on the teachings of Kabbalah, similar to what we learned tonight. So you'd have a Shalosh Shudas where you'd have very simple Jewish Russian people there at the Suda, at the Shalosh Shudas, and Reb Levi would be darshaning, he would be speaking ideas like this. One time, there was someone who asked him, does anybody here understand what you are saying? And Reb Levi pointed to the Rebbe and says, he understands what I'm saying. Yet, something we see which is fascinating, and again, for most of us, it's very hard to sit through something and listen if we don't understand what's flying. And yet, they would come and they would sit out of respect for Reb Levi while he was teaching Torah because of the tremendous love. And the stories elaborate this idea of the great affection and love that he showered on his community members, elderly, young, all together, and therefore they had the utmost derech eretz for him. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu, fortunate we to have these very few teachings of Reb Levi to be able to study, and in the schus of our studying his teachings in honor of his 80th Hilula, schusa yagan aleinu, his merit should protect us and bring us blessings, and should give nachas ruach to the Rebbe. The Rebbe definitely had tremendous nachas when people would learn the teachings of his father, especially when they did so in connection to the Yartzheit. And Be'ezras Hashem, we'll have other opportunities to explore some of the teachings of Reb Levi in the future. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to sharing other opportunities as well. If anyone does have any questions, happy to attempt to address them.
Johnson.
Yes.